Kia ora. I thought I'd read some poems today from my first book of poems, The Death of Music Journalism. It's in fact 5 years to the day that we launched this book. I'm even wearing the t-shirt that I had made for the book to match the cover. You'll see my dear friend, the brilliant artist Matthew Cooper, who's a Kiwi but lives in Las Vegas. He painted this picture. We sort of collaborated a little bit on the ideas of it. And then he kind of said, "Who do you want on your t-shirt?" And I thought it'd be funny for him to paint Bukowski because we both enjoyed this joke that there's a picture of Bukowski on the internet where he's wearing a t-shirt and he has a picture of himself. And I briefly thought about how it'd be quite funny to have a picture of myself on a picture of myself, and I couldn't quite complete that joke, so I decided to pay reference to Bukowski. And then just before the launch of the book, I realized I didn't actually own that t-shirt, and it might be quite fun to own that t-shirt. So I got someone to make the t-shirt for me, to do an illustration based off that, and create the t-shirt. We launched the book at Meow in Edward Street in Wellington. Rachel McAlpine read some poems. Freya Daly-Sagrove read some poems, both of which were brilliant and are favourite writers of mine. Mike Blue played some music. He actually read a poem as well. He's a fantastic poet and musician. It was a real launch party because we had done a kind of boosted campaign for the production of the book and the launch party, and we made enough money, or we made extra money, and so we decided to put it all into the launch of the book. So it was a pretty fun time. This was all on the back of COVID. Like, the book was basically created and designed and put together during the lockdown with me and the Cuba Press. Mary and Paul were amazing to work with. We had a couple of Skype meetings. I sent them about 4,500 poems for them to whittle down to the 90 or so that are in here. It was very much a first book in that sense, just a big bunch of poems with some vague ideas and themes, which Paul did a great job in particular of whittling down into actual themes of music and family and memory. And those are things that have been in my work forever and continue to be in my work. Also stuff about toxic masculinity, which I followed through much more in my second book of poems, the Richard poems. There are hints to that in here. There's a poem called The Flat on the Terrace, which actually features the characters from the second book, basically, and is kind of the genesis of that idea. And I like that idea of linking back to things. I'm writing short stories at the moment, and I've written a short story called The Death of Music Journalism, so it's a completely different topic, but it's riffing on the title of this. So I thought today I would read 5 poems from this book that I am pretty sure I have not read out before. I left this book alone for a long time, and then recently I did a reading and realised it was quite fun to read poems from this book once again. So I'm going to start with a toxic masculinity poem. It is, I was obsessed with this idea that what if we did TED Talks that were only about people named Ted? And I did a bunch of them about Ted Danson and various Teds, and this one is about Ted Bundy. This is the one that made the book. I think I did about 5 or 6 of them. Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man, the wrestler, and many others, but the Ted Bundy one made the book, and it's called The Ted Bundy Talks. They asked Ted Bundy, after he was caught, why he was able to strangle and murder so many people. 17 women at that point or something. His answer, there are so many people. My question, who is they? Who asked him? Ted Bundy died in 1989. He is listed on Wikipedia as an American serial killer, kidnapper, rapist, burglar, and necrophile. Just as, say, Lenny Henry gets the wiki treatment and is dubbed a British stand-up comedian, actor, singer, writer, and television presenter. You can click on hyperlinked text to find out more about the roles of serial killer, kidnapper, rapist, burglar, and necrophile. Wikipedia assumes you don't need to know anything else about the roles of actor, singer, writer, television presenter, nor British stand-up comedian. There are no further links. The pro wrestler King Kong Bundy was named after King Kong and Ted Bundy. His aim was to be seen as being as scary as both, a dreaded combination. The pro wrestler King Kong Bundy is still alive. This surprised me. He turned 60 just yesterday, but only if you're reading this today. Ted Bundy was regarded as handsome and charismatic, according to his victims. I'm not sure how we know this. We can't exactly take their word for it. I'm sure he did. Sometimes Ted Bundy kept parts of victims for months, turning a light on, opening a cupboard, taking some joy from seeing what was there, from knowing it belonged now to him. Other times he would sneak into a room and just bludgeon someone in the dark, smash their skull and leave. Ted Bundy referred to himself as, quote, the most cold-hearted son of a bitch you'll ever meet. I never got to meet him, but I believed him. In 1989, Ted Bundy died. He was executed. The electric chair was his final resting place. In 1989, my favourite song was Electric Chair by Prince. So I'm not really quite sure what I was trying to do there, but I kind of like that. Just the weirdness about how we have obsessions with serial killers. King Kong Bundy, the wrestler, is now dead, R.I.P. I actually, when I wrote that, I liked the idea of deliberately dating something that would be found out. You know, I don't know if he was dead by the time the poem was in the book, but it was very shortly after. The next poem I'm going to read is called The Fluffer to the Devil's Advocate. All this council... Oh, sorry, I'll start again. The fluffer to the devil's advocate. All this cancel culture, I don't know. That's the wrong end of the stick as I see it. I want my cultural heroes to be of questionable morals and ethics. I want them focusing their energies on their work, being their best at the art they pursue, and possibly even the worst human beings as either a direct result of the focus going into one area and the balance not being achieved, or simply because there's an evil in their soul. It's good to have heroes who are also villains. For all they've achieved, you have the chance to feel superior on some important level. And I think, you know, it's pretty obvious what I'm trying to say there. I think I still feel that. My opinion changes day to day and it's case by case, but I've come around to this idea that you not only can't separate the art from the artist, you shouldn't. The person that creates the thing that you like is the person. Now, you don't have to be thinking about that person every step of the way and what they mean and who they are and what they've gone on to do when you're appreciating a piece of art that they've made. You can, I believe, watch a Woody Allen film without questioning whether he's a despicable person or not. You also don't have to. You don't have to watch the film. Anyway, I just like the idea that actually there's this weird little game that I think a lot of us are playing, that if we see someone cancelled, we're in some way sort of suggesting we would never do that, but we never have the chance, or no one is interested in us outing who we are about ourselves. Every human being's done something a bit dodgy. To that point, I shall now read a poem called Different Fires. I thought I had the cure for boredom. I used to set the coffee table alight and dance around its flames. No way could I be tamed. Now I know that boredom is the cure. And that's just a pretty simple poem about growing up. I literally used to have a party trick where I would pour lighter fluid all over a coffee table when new people came to my flat, and I thought it was quite funny to see how they would react to it. And, luckily we're all still here. This is another poem about sort of reflection on age, and it's a music one. It is about Bob Dylan writing the album Infidels, and me realising when I was listening to it a few years ago that I was the same age as him. So it is called Dylan Wrote Infidels when he was 42. I have been thinking a lot about Infidels just lately. Bob was about my age now when he made it. That's not worth thinking about too much, obviously. He had made 21 albums ahead of it though, so it wasn't a case of beginner's luck. Some people talk about Infidels like it was a comeback, as if he had ever been away. He just went somewhere with his material that some people weren't interested in. That was either their loss or it wasn't, but it was not his fault. He was just doing his job as he's always done, but Infidels is where he strips the art of us. It's where he aims right for the heart. 21 albums before it, many of them better than albums anyone else has made. But on none of those albums did he ever sum it up quite so simply, so brilliantly as when he said, or possibly even sung, that he would not handle it if the person fell apart on him. Not on that night. The yearning of the day just been, the worry of what might be to come, and the hope to have that person not just there, then, but forever. A forever that was crystallized in that moment, that night. That's the heart of it all right there. Nearly the best thing he ever wrote, and that's saying something, which is what Dylan does almost all the time, but mostly he does it best when no one's looking, when fewer fans are listening. That's his secret gift. He'll never let the fans see him falling apart. He knows they could not handle it. He does his falling apart between the lines, saves his best work for when you need it. And so that's, obviously one of the main ideas of this book was trying to find a new version of music journalism. I felt like music journalism that I had dedicated a big part of my life to was gone. It's even more gone now, but this was me saying goodbye to it. And there's a few ideas of kind of puns or different reads of the title, but one of the things I liked the idea of was that I started writing these little mini essay-like poems that were, they were essays, they were stories, they were reviews, and I decided they could be poems too. I could put them in a poem form. And some people to this day probably don't think what they just heard then is a poem, but I reckon the person writing it gets to decide what it is. The person reading it gets to decide whether they like it or not, whether it's successful or not, but the person writing gets to decide the form. And so I declared that a poem, and I then thought it was quite funny that, you'd have this title, The Death of Music Journalism. It's kind of like, are these poems where music journalism went to die? Are these some sort of rebirth of it? I don't know. But it's fun thinking about this sort of 5 years on. And I'll close this reading with nearly the last poem in the book. This copy that I'm actually reading, I signed to my son, Oscar. He wanted the first copy of the book. He was young when this came out, and he was quite proud of it. He had a poster of it on his wall. Now he sits in the other room and games and thinks that poetry is cringe, I think. But anyway, I did write this poem for him, and on some level, I think for us, this still stands. It's called We Listen to the Beatles. We listen to the Beatles because they're the best band in the world. They mean the most to the largest number of people, and that's changing, and that's all good too. But when my son asks me if this is a Paul or a John or a George song, or tells me that he knows it's a Paul song because of the balladry, or a John song because it's angry, I can only think back to when I was his age and I asked my dad and my uncle to tell me who the fourth Beatle was because I couldn't remember the name George Harrison. I was about 5 years old or whatever. John Lennon had only just died, I suppose. I can't remember if my dad was sad about that, but I have to presume that he was. The world was, and sometimes still is, right? We listen to the Beatles in the car, on the turntable, and via a Bluetooth speaker. We listen to the Beatles on the computer, watch YouTube clips, flip through books. Will it ever stop? I fucking hope not. So thank you. That's me reading 5 poems from The Death of Music Journalism on its 5th birthday. I hope you enjoyed some of that. The book is obviously long out of print. I still see it from time to time in secondhand bookstores. If anyone wanted a copy of the book based on this, I think I have a couple spare. Send me a message. Okay, bye.